Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Our guest in this episode was born and raised in Brockville, Ontario. For those of you not familiar with the geography, Brockville is a small city located about 45 minutes east of Kingston along the St. Lawrence River. Shortly after university and a short time teaching, Sean Billing discovered his passion in the hospitality industry. This career has taken him from hotels and resorts in different parts of Canada, the United States, and Africa, finally landing back in Eastern Ontario as managing partner in the Frontenac Club. The club has hosted the likes of Alexander Graham Bell and Michael Ondaatje and boasts a rich history over its 180-year lifespan. It is now a 20-room hotel located in the heart of historical Kingston. Here is our conversation with Sean Billing. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Dave.
I'm sure the Frontenac Club has many stories to tell, but I want to start with your story and how you got into the hospitality industry.
Wow.
How short a story is this?
Well, it can be as short as you possibly want. I finished university. I had done some teaching to sort of keep some money in my pocket. I had done some coaching, and the opportunity came up to take a job overseas. That didn't pan out, and it led me back to sort of home, if you will, back to hospitality, where I had worked to put myself through school. That led to an opportunity at the Jasper Park Lodge with Canadian Pacific Hotels, and I really did that with the intention of paying off my student loan, and what I found is that I really loved the job. Mm-hmm. I loved hospitality, and I really enjoyed the benefits that came with us, the friendships, the travel, the good food, the good wine, really were enticing to me, and so I went to Jasper with the intention of working 3 or 4 months, and really didn't leave, to put it that way, didn't leave hospitality from that point on.
Now, when I was reading something about you, you have worked for different chains and you've worked in different locations around the world. Let's talk a little bit about some of the places where you have worked.
Oh, well, yeah, that's been a big part of the journey for me. As I said, I went back to the Rockies to start my professional career. I had worked out there as an 18-year-old. And went back out, and that led to really a series of 3-year postings. I did 3 years at Jasper Park Lodge, then I worked 3 years as what they called the learning coach for Alberta, so I was responsible for Canadian Pacific's 7 hotels in Alberta and helping with strategy and training, management training, as well as frontline training. Then I went from there to working for Western Canada and spending a lot of time in Toronto and traveling around. And then as Canadian Pacific bought the Fairmont group of companies, that allowed us to expand into the Caribbean and into the United States. And so I was sometimes the first pebble on the beach for those things in places like San Francisco and Chicago and Acapulco, Mexico and Scottsdale, Arizona. I parlayed that into a chance to go and work overseas in Africa. I worked 3 years out of Nairobi, was responsible for 6 hotels in East Africa. That allowed me to work in Dubai and Egypt and South Africa. And then with the birth of my child, who was born in Nairobi, he's a little Kenyan boy. He's not so little anymore at 16. We decided to come back home and be closer to family. And so I got back to the Chateau Laurier, spent 3 great years at the Chateau Laurier. Worked after the Chateau Laurier, went to work for an independent company and ran a ski and golf resort north of Toronto, which was a lot of fun and a great learning curve for me. Then from there, set up my own consulting company, and we went looking for a place to own. I kind of got to the point in my career where I thought, geez, I'm tired of making money for other people. Let's see if I could make some money for myself. So.
Let me stop you there. So we don't want to get too far. I want to find out if there was anything that stood out from all of these places where you have worked that sort of sticks out in your mind as, there was an experience that you'll remember for a while.
Well, they all were great experiences. I mean, they all sort of helped forge my experience and my perspective on things. Being in Africa was an absolutely incredible time in my life. My wife and I, we were young and mobile and wanting to travel, and it was really a humbling experience to go there and to learn about African hospitality and to understand the ethic of the people who live there and what made them unique. It was never Fairmont's desire to run a Canadian hotel in Africa. It was always to run an African hotel in Africa. And so that period of discovery and learning about the cultures and the tribes and the language and all of those things were just absolutely incredible. It was humbling in that there are such great people everywhere in the world doing incredible things when it comes to hospitality and tourism. And to meet so many like-minded people halfway around the world, and to be able to not only learn from them, but give them opportunities. We sent more than 100 Kenyans to jobs abroad because they were so great at hospitality and so creative and so intelligent and so warm. And so that was, I had always learned in my North American stops that there were great people everywhere. There was talent everywhere for hospitality and tourism. You just had to find it and unlock it. It was really eye-opening to go to the Emirates and Africa and South Africa and Egypt and spend time in Europe and see similar talent around the world, which was, we sort of began to explain it that there's a canary song. There's a way in which people think and behave that predisposes them to being great at hospitality and tourism. We could train them how to check a guest in or how to close a bill or to do all those kinds of things. But if they had that natural talent, and if we could find and unlock that talent, that was so powerful. So that was a really powerful lesson for me to have reinforced. I think I probably always believed it. It just was never more evident than we went into other cultures and found these incredible hospitality professionals.
As I'm sitting here listening to you, I wrote down a line that you threw out, and I have to remember it, so I wrote it down. First pebble on the beach.
Yeah.
I like that line.
Well, there were lots of times where we were taking over a hotel. We were transitioning a hotel. We were taking the hotel from one culture to another. We would buy an independent hotel and want to rebrand it as a Fairmont. One of the most terrific experience was going to Keilani. The hotel was called Keilani in Maui. And to go there and learn about their culture and how powerful the Hawaiian culture is, and the legend and the myth and the faith of those people, not a religious faith, but a faith in one another and a faith in good. And then trying to apply that to what Fairmont did, because again, we weren't trying to run a Canadian hotel in Hawaii. We wanted to run an authentic Hawaiian hotel. And so it was incredible to be, and I guess I had a little bit of an adaptability or perhaps a flexibility that allowed the company to take some comfort that they could send me on these kinds of things, go in, assess a situation, and do it in a manner that was going to help propel the business forward. And so a lot of the times that I got to go and work on strategic planning or to go and work on understanding a culture and then relaying that information back was really rewarding for me. And so we used to joke there was a couple of us who were the first pebbles on the beach. I was often from a strategic and human resources standpoint. There were some folks who were on the rooms or on the accounting side or on the purchasing side. So we had a little team of people that would move around and became like family for us.
When you want to have a long career in a particular industry, you tend to get to the point where you want to focus on something in particular that this industry offers you. So I was reading, and you've already talked a little bit about it, the business of transitioning a hotel or strategic planning for that particular hotel or rebranding the hotel for whatever reason. What drew you to that kind of thing within the industry that you liked doing?
Wow, great question. It was exciting to do that. It was creating something new or unearthing things that perhaps were already there but were underplayed. One of the things that always shocked me was when I would go to a place, I'd see something with new eyes. I was coming in as an outsider, and I would say, "You guys do this incredibly well." And they would sort of say, "Really? Like, we just do that?" And I'd say, "Well, no, that's really, there's something there. Mm-hmm. Let's think about that as we're creating a new strategy. Let's really think about what that means and how that impacts what we're going to do." So I had a lot of fun doing that. It was discovery for me, and I was inquisitive, I think, and that that helped build relationships with people that I was interested first in them, not so much interested in telling them about us from the company standpoint. And I think that was really, really pretty powerful. And I think that's what drew me to it. It was the fantastic relationships. It was learning. I was called at one point in my career a learning coach. And the idea was to take the best practices and ideas from one property and bring it to another. And, I really was overjoyed when I would find something and say to myself, this is going to help Hotel X because they have this problem and haven't been able to tackle it. Mm-hmm. And so it was so much fun to do that work. And that turned into strategic work. How do we begin to put together 40, 50, 60, what ended up being over 100 hotels that are all unique and different in different locations? How do we bind them together but allow them to be unique and different and offer the kind of experience that would encourage people to collect them as if they were artifacts. I've got to stay at the Banff Springs Hotel, or I've got to go to the Scottsdale Princess, or I can't wait to get to the Masai Mara and stay at the Fairmont there because I know it's going to be new and different and interesting, but still have the hallmarks of a luxury hotel.
And that's what people want, I think, when they travel, is they want to go someplace that's different from their space, their culture, and absorb that, which is what you're basically talking about.
Yeah, bang on. Yeah, that's exactly correct.
You grew up in the Brockville area.
I did.
And you traveled around the world with different hotel chains. And at some point, you came back here to Kingston.
Yes.
Kingston, Ontario. First of all, we preface this by saying, for those of you listening who have not been to Kingston, Kingston is right at the junction of Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River, if you're looking for it on a map. And so within all of your travels, something brought you back to this area. So what was it?
Primarily family. It was what brought me back. My mom and dad, and my wife is from the West Island of Montreal, and we met working in hotels. So our family brought us back here as they were aging, and we had nieces and nephews, and we had a newborn. So that brought us back to Canada. What brought us specifically back to this area, in addition to family, was this is just a great place to live and work. It was, and has been. My home's actually in Picton. It's been an incredible place for my son to grow up, to be able to play sports, to be safe, to hop on his bike without a concern, to go to the beach. It really is a wonderful lifestyle, and that's what brought us back. What brought us to the Frontenac Club was we were looking for a place to operate and had made no secret of that. And a family member said, Kingston could use a great hotel. Why don't we work together to make that happen? And that's what happened. We put together a partnership, which included 3 families, my own and 2 others. And we went looking for the place. And when we found the Frontenac Club sitting here as a little bed and breakfast inn, we knew this was the place. And Kingston is so, I think, undersold. And I don't mean that to reflect on what Visit Kingston or the city or economic development or the chamber or anybody does. It's just not well understood what's here. Kingston has a vibrant downtown that is still alive. So many downtowns now are not the kinds of places people would want to stroll down. And Kingston has this incredible downtown and history and education, a vibrancy that comes from the universities and the colleges. And as you said, it's at the juncture of 2 great waterways and natural. You're 15 minutes out of the city, and you could be anywhere anywhere in the forest and not think for a second about being in a city. So it's just a wonderful place to be in, and it is home to me. Right, this area is really home.
Just following up on one of the points you made there, the business of people coming from all over to find Kingston. I participated in what, for those of you who are from out of town, every summer the main drag in Kingston is called Princess Street, and they close the street to traffic. A lot of cities do this. And this year it's 4 times a year during the summer that they will be doing it. But I participated in a booth last fall, and people were coming up to the booth. And at one point we started to count, and there were people from 12 different countries who had come, who now make Kingston their home. And these are countries that you wouldn't expect to have ever heard of Kingston, but have moved here with their families and enjoy life here. When you came to the Frontenac Club, so for those people who don't know anything about this place, before you did the renovations, which we'll talk about in a moment, describe for us what the Frontenac Club was going back. Now, it has a history that's about 180 years long.
Yeah. So today's Frontenac Club is actually 3 separate buildings that have been amalgamated. What we refer to as the starting point is the 1845 wing where we're sitting right now. We're actually sitting inside the old bank vault. This was the first Bank of Montreal that was purpose-built outside of Quebec, Lower Canada. And when it was contemplated, this was to be the capital city branch for Bank of Montreal. So that's the grandness of this building. That's the reason it has guest rooms in it is it was the first time Bank of Montreal offered housing to try and attract staff to come to Kingston. The 60 years that from 1845 until roughly 1905 that this was a bank, the people not only lived here, but there was commerce here, which was an incredible thing to think about. The bank left, moved to different digs, and the Frontenac Club was formed, which was a social club. And the original members were people like Alexander Graham Bell and Sir Sandford Fleming and General Arthur Currie. So a really storied group of people that really reflected how important Kingston was at that time. A former capital of Canada, really an educational and military and political center of Canada at that time. The club ran for roughly 30 years, and they, in addition to occupying and doing some renovations on the bank building, bought the 2 lots beside it. One lot was completely empty, and they built what we refer to as the club wing. And in there they put a dining room, a kitchen, billiards tables, card rooms, and a bowling alley. So there's still a 2-lane. The lanes are still under the floor. We've taken some sections up and converted them to furniture so that we can talk about that history. And then they also bought an 1826 house that we refer to as the Cartwright House, which has 4 suites in it. That was, we believe, from what we can find, the lead hand's house on the Cartwright land, which was some 750, 800 acres that stretched from here out to where today Queens is. So it really does have a pretty incredible past. When the club folded during the Depression, it was bought by a family. That family did a number of things over the 65-odd years that they had it. They ran it as a hotel. They had apartments. It was student residence. There was a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer's office in here. At certain times, there was a daycare in here for 40 years called the Frontenac Club Daycare. So it was really, it's had more than 9 lives, this old girl. My predecessors picked it up around 2000 and slowly but surely would convert one room into a guest room. And they went from having 1 room to 15 guest rooms when we encountered it. And we fell in love with the space right away. It's a silly thing to say. We were not looking at this building. We were walking by, coming from looking at another building that was for sale. My partner said, well, it's not for sale, but let's go in and see if this place feels right. And quite stupidly, I went to the door and I reached out and I grabbed the old brass knob that was on the front door, and I got a shock. And it was not a jolting shock. It was one of those pleasant kind of things, which I didn't really think about until I walked in and was sort of wowed by the possibility. The hotel had been very undercapitalized. The couple who ran it were lovely, and they did an amazing job of hospitality, but they didn't have the money to keep it up. And so that began our vision. That was mid-2016 began our vision, and it took us more than a year to acquire the building. And then we were already planning before we had even bought it about what we would do with it. And then we took the next 18 months after we acquired it to plan and work on culture and think about who we wanted to hire and how we wanted to do things, and then closed it for 2 years and did what you're seeing around you, Dave. Your listeners can't see it, but
the people who were members of the club or visited the club over the years going back, we mentioned a couple, Alexander Graham Bell, which jumped out at me right away because that's a name I know.
Yeah,
I
and
think
we have a
everybody
bell room
knows.
here today. Yeah.
And so he would be a member, and they would come in how often? These famous people.
Hard to say. Some were here very regularly from what we can follow in the various newspapers of the day. And we have a historian on our team, a friend of yours, Arthur Milne. So Arthur's done an extensive dive, gone to the Queen's Archives and dived in. They would come quite frequently. There were dinners here. There were, this was at one point, it seemed to be a Conservative Party of Canada hotbed fundraising kind of place. There were exhibitions put on here, world-class snooker players and bowlers. Arthur dug up a story about how at one point during the winter season, they converted a couple of the spaces in the club wing into an indoor golf hitting range. We're talking in the 20s. This is post World War I. And they were teaching, they hired a pro, and he was teaching ladies and kids how to golf, as well as the gentlemen could come in. But, you know, they had bowling exhibitions here. There were, a myriad of fundraisers and important political speeches. So there was just an incredible number of people who have passed through the doors. We know Harold Chamberlain was here. We know that Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, was here while he was touring military installations, thinking about setting up a military college in Pakistan. We have pretty good tracing that Churchill stopped here for a bite to eat. Don't think he stayed, but it looks pretty evident that he came through on a visit to Kingston in the late 20s. He was not prime minister then. He was working for the Department of Defense. There's just a sort of a litany of people who were significant around, in that time period between 1905 and 1935.
That's the fun of acquiring a building like this. Before we go much further, let's describe the exterior of the building, because I'm looking at this building now and I'm thinking bowling alley, doctor's offices, golf shots inside the building. Describe the physical building right now.
Well, the bank wing is what you would think a stately old bank would be. It's 3 stories of that blue limestone that's quarried north of Kingston up in Sydenham and so on. It's very similar to Kingston City Hall because it was designed and built by the same folks. Power and Sons were the designers, and George Brown, and we're all the same. So it's got this sort of stately manner. It's what you think. It's a very masculine building, so it's what you think a bank would be back in that day when it would be built. So large, high pilasters and big, beautiful windows, the kind of windows that no one would ever build today, right? Just massive, windows in this particular wing, and big, high ceilings, and exposed limestone on the interior. So it's a really attractive, facade, if you will, the attractive streetscape. And then the club wing and the Cartwright wing are fieldstone, really, and along with limestone, sort of reflecting when they were built and when they were done, and the various additions that were here. So you've got a little bit of a labyrinth as you work through the 3 buildings, but they're all connected, and our designers did a wonderful job of making it seamless and feel that way. And that was a big part of the fun was you had these 3 buildings, and they in some ways were very distinct in terms of how they set up. How do you protect the historical elements of each of those buildings so you could tell the story, but also how do you make them livable? I mean, nobody wants a historic bathroom experience. So the idea that we could have respect for the history and improve and save this building, set it up for another, when we bought it was 175 years old, set it up for another 175 years was really what we wanted to do.
When you established a plan for the building, when you took it over, part of the plan was to go from 16 rooms to 20 rooms to make it more of a hotel than a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
So one of the things you were doing is knocking down walls or finding stuff in the walls. And I'm curious, some of the history you found inside the walls or when you were actually moving things around.
That was the part, because I had worked on historic hotels in the past and been a part of those restorations. That was the part I was kind of most excited about, because we had it in our brains that nobody had probably taken every wall down in the 175 plus years, now 180 years, that the building had been here. There were no plans, so there was no as-built drawings. There was no way for us to know what we were going to find. We also, because we had lived in the building for about 18 months and had, poked around and thought and measured and done things, we knew there were nooks and crannies that had been covered over, and that there were voids in walls, and that there were, that we had height, ceilings had been dropped consecutively over 175 years of restorations, and all of a sudden we didn't know how much space we had. So it was really incredible to do that, to first find the space. A lot of the rooms got bigger. Because what had happened in successive renovations is they just put up more drywall. Over the lath and plaster, more drywall, more drywall. There must have been a fashion at one time, which is hard for me to kind of fathom, but certainly understandable. There would have been a time where they didn't want stone visible, probably because it was cold and difficult to heat, and maybe cold looking and feeling, in addition to actually the sort of thermal property. So all this stone was uncovered. So we were finding these beautiful walls that probably hadn't seen the light of day for 100 years, and thinking, gosh, what do we do with this? In the walls, we found coins. Now, I don't want to give anybody the impression that we got rich doing the renovation, but what we found was a really incredible set of coins. We found an 1857 Upper Canada pence. We found pfennigs, we found pounds, we found francs. We've found U.S. coins, we found Canadian coins of various vintages, but they really spanned. 1857 all the way up to kind of present day, with all of these. The German pfennigs we found were wartime. They were just after the war, and we were thinking these could have been some of the first pieces minted again in the New Germany. We found newspaper articles and magazines. We found cigarette packs from World War II. And we know it's World War II because when you open them up, they still had the note in there that said, for $10, send 1,000 cigarettes to the troops. And, and you had little keepsakes in there. We found all kinds of alcohol bottles. So clearly there was a lot of things being stashed. We found love letters that had fallen in behind some of the old, grates for the radiated heating system, or under floors. We found an entire play that looks like it was written 68, 69-ish, which jibes with understanding there was a Queen's professor in the drama department that lived here for about 20 years. So just all kinds of neat things. For me, what was probably the day that kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies to a certain extent was what I had said to the team doing the demolition. If you find anything, bring it to me, and if it's cool or significant, I'll get you 6 beer. So everything was coming, right? Everything was coming. These guys were bringing everything. But there's one day one guy said, well, I probably won't get any beer for this, but if you go up into what is now room 204, if you go up there, there's a bunch of magazines. Found them behind the radiator. It's like, well, what are they? He goes, they're a bunch of Canadian Home Journal and that kind of thing. So I walk up and I go into the room and I don't know what I'm going to find. And lying open on one of the big, deep windowsills is a magazine from 1932. Canadian Home Journal, I think is what it was called. And it was open to a 2-page spread on Jasper Park Lodge, a place I had worked twice in my career, where I met my wife. And I just sort of stopped and I got that feeling like, that's really incredible, right? For a place that's so dear to me and was so important in my life, that's the pages that this thing is open to. And so we still have that. We found all kinds of other things. Raffle tickets from the 1952 figure skating raffle. And what they were giving away was a Dodge. We found drink tickets from the officers' mess. And we kept sort of joking that, I wonder if they'd still take them. And that got a lot of the demolition guys excited too, that maybe these tickets would still be valuable here.
Now, with the play that you found, any thoughts about staging the play?
Well, we didn't find the whole play.
Okay.
What we actually found was carbon paper of the lines that were written out, and then we found a couple of pages of those, and it just, again, that reminded, I have a fairly young staff. So Arthur and I are we refer to ourselves as the old guys. And we actually remember carbon paper and mimeograph and, because that was duty we would often get assigned, right, as printing those things out. So we remembered seeing that. And there was a poster that was in terrible shape, unfortunately, but you could see it was advertising, trying to advertise the play. We couldn't even see the name of it because it had been so obscure, but we could see the date that it was to be put on. And it was neat. And some of the love letters were really flowery, and postcards that we found. There's a couple of examples in our display cabinet of postcards that obviously were given to military men. And, they sort of just parachuted into, when it's a shot, where you had a background that looks like you're holding a parachute. And these are World War I postcards that obviously were given. So it was really neat to sort of reassemble the history, at least in our brains, of the stuff that we found.
It's really neat because I volunteer with a small museum in town. And we have a whole pile of artifacts that have been packed away in boxes, and we're slowly opening the boxes and finding stuff and going, wow, this is really cool. This goes back to whatever. And it's that history thing that really excites people. And one of the benefits of living in a city like Kingston is there is a lot of history to peruse at your leisure.
Yeah, well said, for sure.
When you did the renovation, so you've completed the renovations, what does the place look like now compared to what it looked like before?
Well, all due respect to the previous owners, when my wife and I came in and stayed, we did a reconnaissance day, a recce, and we got a tour. The staff member who was on the team at that time, who I continued to work with until the renovation, and then he retired, took us on tour. And at the end of the tour, my wife pulled me aside and she says, it looks like a unicorn threw up in here. And I said, what? And she goes, every room was a different color. And I understand why. Every toilet was different. Every faucet was different, because what the previous owners would do is, if they had a good year, they'd say, well, we're going to renovate another room. Yeah. And they'd go to Home Depot or Canadian Tire and say, okay, what's the hot paint color? What can we get at a reasonable price in terms of sinks and toilets and shower heads and all those kinds of things? And they do it. And so the place was really eclectic and fun, but very special and very dear to the guests who stayed here, many of whom continue to stay with us. There's just something in the stone, I think, that people really enjoy. So it was very hodgepodge. It was like a unicorn threw up. And it was hard to manage because it would be, what sink was that I have to replace? What cartridge is that? What trap do I have to get? And so we immediately, as part of our planning process, in that lived-in sense, which was so important to us to have had spent time in the building, began to develop a plan about how we would want it to operate, that we would want it to have a consistent look and feel within the rooms, but to respect the history and heritage of each room. We deliberately chose the names of the rooms, some of which were already names on the room. There already was a bell room. There already was an Ondaatje room, because Michael Ondaatje, writer of The English Patient, the collected works of Billy the Kid, etc., lived in this building when he was doing his master's at Queen's. So we deliberately delved into the history of the building and respected some of what the previous owners had done, because it was really brilliant. But we also knew that we needed to contemporize and modernize a lot of the things. As I said, the idea of stepping into an old clawfoot tub and having to pull a
shower
curtain around you that sort of hung funny and water splashing everywhere wasn't really what we wanted to do when we wanted to bring a certain sense of luxury to Kingston. So with respect to what had been done previously, which was fantastic, we had a new vision. And so it's very crisp and clean now. It's, we added the bar, we added a patio, we put a rooftop patio on, we added the additional suites. We tried to create some other spaces within the club. There's a candy bar, there's a game area, there's just some different things that would appeal to sort of the different sensibilities of travelers.
Now, you've talked a lot about integrating the history of the building into the plan that you've had over the last couple of years when you were doing the renovation. Is there a sense that you're taking this particular new vision for the Frontenac Club and integrating it into the history of Kingston? And how does it fit in terms of the city itself and all that surrounds it?
Definitely. We reside in the Sydenham ward here, so we're sort of on the edge of downtown. We're as you head this way towards Queens and outside, we're sort of the last commercial building inside the downtown core. All of our neighbors then are limestone buildings or historic buildings. Many of them have been designated. It's one of the places where people who don't know the hotel will say to me, well, does it have a water view, or what's the view of? And I'll say, it has a city view, and you can hear them kind of go, ugh. And I'll say to them, no. This is one of the most spectacular city views you're going to see. You're going to look out and see beautiful, these beautiful, red brick townhomes. You're going to see the spires of the churches and cathedrals that are in this neighborhood. And I just had somebody stay in what we call the Spires room, which has two big, beautiful windows that look at St. George's and up to St. Paul's and the Greek church and all those things. And they said, you were absolutely right. That's a stunning view. I love this room. And that's not our biggest room. It just happens to be one that if you're into history, it appeals to. So it was very important for us. The two other families involved, the Skolnicks and the Rosens, are proud Kingstonians who have histories here that go back many, in some cases, decades and decades and decades. And so they were particularly wanting us to make sure that we were really connected to what was going on downtown. And so we've not only did we work very closely with the Heritage Foundation in the city in order to make sure that we were doing a respectful restoration of the building in addition to a renovation, but we've also remained very engaged with our responsibilities on local boards, whether it be tourism or development. We've remained very well connected with the city. We were delighted to be invited to the mayor's emergency group when COVID hit, and we were invited to be the representative both as hospitality professionals, but also as somebody who had made a significant investment in the city. And we take that very seriously. And so our involvement and our wanting to be a good historical citizen as well as a good business operation was really important to us. That ethic underlies so much of what we did.
Coming back to you, which is where we started this conversation, how do you manifest your passion for this place now that the renovations are completed?
Great question. It really is a business that you can't run by remote control. All of the best hotels and restaurants I've ever worked in around the world, no matter where they are really a reflection of the owners and the leadership team. I learned that lesson. I was very fortunate, to work with people who were passionate about hospitality. And when they saw that talent or spark in you, or they saw something that they could use positively, use for the good of the guest, use for the good of the organization, they would snatch that up. There's no question that there was a series of mentors in my life who pulled me along and said, no, this is a good opportunity for you, including the one who said, Sean, you need to get out of North America if you want to do what you want to do, and go work elsewhere. And I mean, it was like kicking me out of his hotel, but saying, you're the guy for this job. That's what got me to Africa. And so when I think about what I do as somebody who's closer to the end of his hospitality career than to the beginning of it, I think I need to be on the floor passionate. I don't need to make all the decisions, but I need to embody and imbue. And if I get a chance to deal with a guest, I need to deal with them in a way that I want the rest of the team to model. We don't script anybody here. We don't ask the team members to say certain lines or certain words. We've hired them because we saw that spark in them. And in one way or another, they have a talent that contributes to what we do. So, what I do is hire for talent, build relationship with those people, try and understand who they are, set expectations that I know that they can not only meet but exceed, and then try and reward them when they've done that. And that's my pretty simple formula to trying to lead and show people what I think is the recipe for great hospitality at the Frontenac Club.
This has been an enormous project to bring this 180-year-old lady back to life. I want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for getting involved with this particular project.
Oh, thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Sean Billing, a man passionate about his guests, the club, and the history. I'll include the club's website address in the liner notes to this episode. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be back soon with another conversation.
The theme music for the podcast is Stace's Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to the kingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.